Hi, friends. I recently had a CPET. That is short for the Cardiopulmonary Exercise or Exertion Test. These are common tests for any kind of, if you go to a cardiologist, if they're trying to get a baseline of just your function, they often request that you have one, but it's usually a 1 day test, and it's not a full day. It's just it's kind of the terminology that's commonly used. Um, in the CPET, you will get onto a treadmill or a bicycle, like a stationary bicycle, and they'll monitor your exertion for just a little while. They'll ask you to increase or decrease at different times. They'll be measuring a number of things during that time. These are common if you have any kind of lung issues, if you're trying to get screened for COPD or any cardiac issues. But those are what they measure for in those situations um, are more basic things. However, the CPET can be really informative for a number of specialty conditions, and especially for ones that are, I don't know what that light situation was, especially for um, ones that are hard to get information on. So, for example, one of the researchers that I worked with on the test that I just did works with what are termed specialty populations, and that would be just people who have different kinds of conditions, and then we want to see how their body exerts and works with oxygen as it comes in, what kinds of gases they put out as they exert, and so forth. So, for example, outside of my conditions, one of the researchers does these tests with individuals with Down syndrome to see how their biomarkers work. And when we talk about biomarkers, we're just talking about just like if you had a blood test to see if you had HIV, let's say. The biomarker that they're looking for in general would be your T cell count. If your T cell count is low, that indicates HIV. If it's really, really, really low or non-existent, then you would be considered to have AIDS. If you have a high T cell count, then you would be considered to not be um, in that group. So same thing here. So in my case, I was going to this test for the myalgic encephalomyelitis based biomarker protocol. And that's, if you're not familiar with that term, that's what you might have heard of as chronic fatigue syndrome. Um, so, what you can expect in the test, and there are YouTube videos where you can actually see one being done. And so that's very valuable. I found that valuable to watch ahead of time just so that I could get a sense of what is it that we're doing. A lot of us who get to this stage of spending this kind of money on a specialty test have been through a lot of medical trauma already. So it can be very helpful to see the procedure ahead of time on another person. A question that I asked before I went in was, will this be on a bike or on a treadmill? I said, because I have balance issues as part of my condition, kind of symptom constellation, I'll be able to perform best for you if I'm on a bike. And they said, yep, you're going to be on a bike. So great. But you might want to check on that because there are places that do it on a treadmill. I would hope not for our kinds of conditions. Also be aware that for ME, the myalgic encephalomyelitis, I'll refer to this as ME, CFS, chronic fatigue syndrome. You basically have three options for a CPET. You have two options right now for a 2-day CPET, with possibility that at other times you'd have potentially two other options. So the two options you for sure have are the Workwell Foundation in San Francisco area and Ithaca College, College of Health Sciences Wellness Clinic, and that's in Ithaca, New York. And then you also have an option if you want a 1-day CPET, Mount Sinai associated Dr. Benjamin Nadelson office in the neurology department at Mount Sinai in New York. It pays people $350 to do a one-day CPET if they are people who have symptoms of ME/CFS. So if you just want to get a baseline and a sense of things, that may be helpful. He is considered in the United States kind of the prevailing expert on ME/CFS. If you call Mount Sinai, they will tell you they're no longer doing this, which is why I went ahead and paid a lot of money for mine. That is incorrect information. So just ask for an appointment with Dr. Nadelson. It's an expensive appointment. But once they do the steps to get you into the portal, then you'll be able to ask his assistant and just say, hey, I'm actually looking for the CPET if that study is still underway. Then you get paid $350 for it instead of paying $3,000 for it. But I'll explain why the 2-day is much more valuable than the 1 day in a moment. So the two options you have right now, as of today, are Ithaca College and the Workwell Foundation. There's a lot of information by the lead researcher at Ithaca College on YouTube, presentations that she has given to academic communities. You can look at those. I found those very helpful to know the approach and just kind of get a sense of that group. The Workwell Foundation has kind of more polished, a little more advertising-y things on their YouTube channel, but they're very helpful also. But there are two other options that you have at different times. They were not options for me at this time. One is the Bateman Horn Center. I believe that's in Utah, and they're a nonprofit organization that works with these conditions. Because they're a nonprofit and they're running trials as they can, they right now are not running trials and they're not taking any new patients. But by the time you see this, they might be. So you should check. They have a very, very, very strong reputation among patients and in the clinical community. Massachusetts General, and Brigham Young have a partnership working with dysautonomia and ME/CFS on a lot of fronts. I've heard mostly excellent things about them, with the occasional really bad kind of train wreck experience at Mass General for people. That might be another option. The third other option, I told you two, there's really three that I'm thinking of, is the University of Alabama. I believe at Birmingham. They sometimes do, well, they do screening and studies around ME/CFS. So you want to check with them. Their intake is very simple to do, and they ask good questions. You can always tell by the questionnaire that you're given whether somebody gets it or not, and they definitely do. So I was hoping to work with them because I'm down south, and it would be a lot easier for me to just drive a few states over. But that just wasn't how this worked out. So now that you know where to go get one, here's what to expect. So we're going to say that you're going to be on the bicycle, the stationary bicycle. They're going to hook you up to lots of things on their machine. They're going to be measuring a number of things. They're going to put a little oxygen meter on your finger. Then they're going to do a lot of nodes on your chest area. If you wear a bra, you'll be probably taking that off for the event. And then the test itself, although your appointments are about an hour to an hour and a half long, what you're mostly doing is just doing a little bit of paperwork, filling out kind of number-based questionnaires on kind of how you're feeling today in a number of regards. And then you are being hooked up to the item. You give about 5 to 10 minutes of resting flat on your back, and then you'll get onto the bike once you're all hooked up, and then they're going to put a mask on you. It's very tight around the nose. I wouldn't say quite unpleasant, but like the first time they did it on me, I was a little bit panicky. I was kind of scared. So, but because I had glasses, and because my glasses are real cheap and they fog up easily, I don't have the filter on them that keeps them from fogging. you could really tell whether air was escaping from that mask. And so that was actually very helpful in our situation because it meant we didn't have to guess if there was gas coming out. You don't want any gas coming out because you want the gas to go through the tube into their little contraption that measures all the things. And what they're measuring there is how much oxygen you're taking in, how effectively you're doing that, how much carbon dioxide and maybe other gases you're putting out as you exhale, and then other biomarkers in there. And I would urge you, because I'm not a scientist, I'm not going to explain the biomarkers very well, and so I would really encourage you to look up Betsy Keller. That's Betsy with one E, Keller with two L's. There are a number of presentations that she has given to different ME/CFS communities and to academic societies, and they really take you through what each biomarker is about. And what happens is with ME/CFS patients, the researchers see kind of a triangulation of a few different biomarkers really behaving in rather a unique way relative to people with other conditions or people who are healthier or people who are just deconditioned, which means just they haven't worked out in a while, so they're kind of weak. Our numbers tend to come out differently. Now, my numbers haven't come back in yet, so we just hope that we'll get good information from this. But so that's what you want to know about that. What they do is they take your blood pressure. At the place where I went, it was a manual cuff, so it didn't choke me off like the electronic ones do. But it's kind of important that they use a manual one because they're going to be taking your blood pressure every 1 to 2 minutes during your exertion. And so they'll put that in as they go, and every time they take your blood pressure, then they're going to put a few signs up in front of you and say, what was the exertion amount, kind of 1 to 15 scale, and they rate, they give you kind of words associated with every few levels so you can kind of see which one fits you. They also do a pain scale from 1 to 5, a fatigue scale from 1 to 5. So every time they take your blood pressure, they're asking you that. What they want you to do is stay around 60 revolutions per minute, but they electronically change the level of resistance that you're under while you're on the bike. So you're not doing any of that yourself. You're just trying to stay within about 60 RPMs. So they do that for 8 to 12 minutes. I'm pretty sure I didn't make it past 8 for either of the tests myself. I'm not even sure I made it to 8 the first time. But then once you can't keep up that 60 for 30 seconds or 45 seconds or so, then they know that you're maxed out and that's the most you can do, and then they kind of stop. So I did not find it painful. I did not find it panic inducing, aside from like having the mask on and just not knowing that was going to happen, but then I was okay. So just know they're going to do that. And, if you have some glasses that you can take with you to see if you're fogging up, that really helped us a lot. You could even take sunglasses because most sunglasses don't have that, fog filter. So I'd recommend that. And then they let you rest for 5 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever you need, but they kind of tend to have you lay down for at least 5 minutes. You're just right by the bike. There's the place where you lay down. They help you to transition locations and positions. So if you have POTS or any kind of dizziness or lightheadedness, they'll help you. And then you come back the next day and do it again. What they tend to find with people with ME is that we either can't even get up to a decent level of oxygenation in the first place, or oxygen conversion into energy in the body, or we do kind of okay the first day, but the second day we're kind of dead as a doornail. When they take our baseline day 1, day 2 with our questionnaires, and then a few days later, what they tend to find is that there was a lot of recovery time involved. There certainly was for me. After the first day, I went back to the hotel and was like asleep for 4 solid hours, which was kind of wonderful in the sense that I never get to sleep that well. But It was just kind of astonishing to have exerted for that short a period of time and should just be kind of dead on arrival at the hotel. After the second day, they actually did some fascia work on me because my ribs are all messed up. Like they actually look like this different. Like the bottom of them is this different. And so they did some fascia work on me. There was an expert on that in the team that helped me, and so I definitely think that helped me have an easier recovery time, like really much easier. But I've still been recovering for several days from it. Um, so that's something you can keep in mind. If you are needing that kind of test for disability benefit documentation purposes, they are accustomed to that. And you have major clinics who do it. You're paying out of pocket usually. If you have a helpful cardiologist or PCP, I'd certainly recommend asking them for a referral for that test. And I know that Ithaca College is very transparent and good at communicating the CPT, the procedure code that you would need in order to ask for reimbursement of that, even out of network, 50% reimbursement or whatever from your insurance company. But they are out of pocket costs. Mine was $3,000. I believe the one at Workwell Foundation right now is $3,200, if I remember correctly. So that's kind of the price range that you're looking at. So it's not something you want to do casually, probably. You probably want to do a 1-day CPET through one of the clinical trials as those come up if you don't need it for disability documentation. But of course, if you do need it for disability documentation, you really just kind of have to do what you have to do. So I hope that is helpful. I know that the Workwell Foundation post CPET survey is a little bit different than the one at Ithaca. The one at Workwell is more freehand. You fill in kind of your symptoms and what you found in your recovery time. At Ithaca College, it is more it's more quantitative, and so you'll circle numbers that fit your level of recovery. But there's also if you have things that are not listed that you were working with, like for me, I had a cough kind of immediately after the first test, and that lasted several days. Things like that. Had that humongous nap, things like that that kind of fill in some context. They were certainly open to that, and they had me write that in. So hope that helps. Would be curious about anyone else's experience with the CPET. I will say, and this is probably important to mention actually. So when I was researching the CPET, I was concerned about the level of recovery time that was going to be needed, and the fact that the point in the CPET clinically is kind of to induce post-exertional malaise, PEM, which is a major, maybe even the most major symptom of ME/CFS. And what that term means is that, like, I could go to the grocery store and then need to be asleep for 3 days to recover. Like, it's really disproportionate levels of fatigue based on just basic chores or that kind of thing. So I was concerned, and people talk a lot in some support groups about, like, okay, this is CPET is sort of ethical, sort of not ethical. Like, it's sort of a required evil, but it's really not quite an ethical test. That was not my experience with it, and I am a major bulldog when it comes to bioethics. But I really did not feel exploited at all. I found both of the places that do this stuff right now are women led, and it really shows. It just really shows. The one that I went to was completely women operated and staffed and led. And while I have plenty of really crappy doctors who have been women who are very much in the patriarchy soup and might as well be men, I did not find that issue at the clinic that I went to for this procedure. This was definitely not just operated by women, but really designed and fully autonomously run by women. And again, it's not to say that there's anything magical about being a woman, but when we can operate outside of this historically, hundreds of years old patriarchal medical space, I just found it to be very valuable. But back to the torture of the CPET. I did not find it torturous. My body's extremely, extremely sensitive. I did not find it torturous at all. It was probably the only test I've done this entire year that didn't hurt my body. I knew that there would be fatigue to it, and they have a lot of structures in place. They don't let you drive yourself there. They don't let you drive yourself back. On either day, you really have to just stay put and just allow the fatigue to sort of do its thing. But it did not. What they've found, if you look up on YouTube, the results that they have found, clinically speaking, what they found is that post-exertional malaise is not more severe after a CPET than after kind of the basic chores that we do. And, if you think about it, I mean, you lay down for several minutes, you do this thing for 6 to 12, 15 minutes tops. They turn it off if you max out early, and then you rest again. And then you go home and rest for, 18 hours and come back and do it again. So it's not, it might be that it would kick our asses if clinically we were allowed to like do stuff in between, but we're not allowed to do stuff in between. And so you really have maybe even more rest than you would usually have after a fatiguing activity, especially if you have kids or dependents or, people you have to take care of, or if you're working. So I would just say that's a myth that I would say don't stress about maybe too much, because there is a lot of airtime that gets dedicated to, oh, this is a dangerous test. I am so sensitive to testing that, I mean, I've had to have lots of tests like discontinue while we were doing them that I still had to pay for. This was not anything. This was the least invasive test I've done in almost a year. And boy, I've done a lot of testing in the past year. So I can offer that. I hope that's helpful. So anyway, toodaloo for now. We'll try to post other useful things as we come to know them.